I've decided that I have too many 286s. I'm not particularly nostalgic for that platform, and I don't have any, aside from the Tandy 1000 that I have that has a 286, which is an XT with a 286, right? It's not even really an AT. I don't have any special 286s, right? I don't have an original PC AT. I don't have any of the like PS2 machines that were 286s. I don't have anything that's like special, and I'm not nostalgic for it because I very briefly had a 286 back in the day, and that was given to me, and when I realized that it could hardly play Wolfenstein 3D, it was gone. I had no use for it. So over the years, I've acquired this set of 286s. In addition, there's the Tandy 1000 that I previously mentioned, and I have a 286 bridge board for big box Amigas somewhere. This computer I picked up this previous summer, I think in July at a warehouse sale of sorts. This computer I had to go look this up in my spreadsheet. I got this computer in August of 2018, and if I remember correctly, I got it it was in some woman's sewing room. She was a prolific sewer, but the computer was in there, I don't know why. So I've had this one for quite a while. And then this, which I don't know if I'll be able to really do anything with, I got so long ago, it was before I kept notes about when I bought things and how much I paid for them and where I got them. The only notes that I have is Craigslist, which I got it from some dude on Craigslist. I have no recollection when I got it or how much I paid for it or anything, which means that I've probably had it since 2015 or before. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do anything with this. It's missing the BIOS and it's missing the clock chip. So I don't know, and there's some corrosion around in this area. There's no battery on it, but this is definitely battery looking corrosion on it. So this may be a goner. I have already taken some pictures of it. This model is known on the retro web, but there was no pictures of the actual board. I've taken some high-res pictures and sent those off. So by the time you're watching this video, it's hopefully on the retro web. I'm gonna try to revive it by borrowing BIOS chips off one of these other 286s because they'll probably be compatible. It's at least worth a try. I'll see what I can figure out on it. The plan for the rest of these is I'm probably going to basically gut them. I'm going to replace whatever kind of hard drive controllers are in them. I'm assuming that they probably have hard drive controllers, and they're probably MFM. Replace those with ISA IDE controllers. I'm going to replace whatever video cards are in them with some kind of VGA controllers. I'll put in some kind of sound card. I will also put in a network card. And on the network, the reason for the network card being there isn't to network them, but is because the network cards that I have all have a socket on them for a ROM chip, and I can put XT-IDE BIOS on that to be able to use the IDE controllers, because surely the BIOSes on these things, if they even have a BIOS, are old enough that they won't know what an IDE controller is, and even if they do, it'll be super janky old IDE support that will be a major hassle and will limit to, you know, very, very small hard drives. So let's start by taking a look at the outside of these and then digging into them. A case badge that I'm not sure if is branding or if is just descriptive. Options 286. Nice turbo switch, big chunky feel, and this panel seems to be reset. Like I can get the tool in here. I don't know how I feel about that. Disk activity light, turbo light, power light, reset switch. Reset switch feels a little bit mushy. 3 externally accessible drive bays. I don't know what you would need 3 externally accessible drive bays for on a 286, because I wouldn't put a CD-ROM in one. An installed 5¼ inch drive. Based on the look of it, I'm guessing it's probably 1.2 meg, but don't know for sure. And nothing else. On this side, there's nothing except some kind of like little bit of drip mark on the back. Looks like a similar kind of video card situation as the other one. These screws, I would have expected larger kinds of screws on these, something more this size. So I'm not sure what that means. These all, that seems like it's a card. These are slots, just slot covers. Again, an I/O, multi-I/O card with parallel, serial, and game port. AT keyboard port. Interesting that this one has spots over here for parallel or serial ports to be. Power input, power pass-through, fan grill. Well, this one has a FCC ID and a model that says 286 turbo. So I knew, without opening this one, because I have not opened this one yet, I knew that this was going to be a 286. There's a lot of clues that it's a 286. And again, on the side, this one has the typical big, chunky, satisfying power switch. All right, this one, I also removed the screws off camera. This one I have not been into at all, so this will be a surprise for everyone involved. Okay, that is creative. So this is a 3.5 inch, half height, 3.5 inch hard drive. Also MFM or RLL or something along those lines. And because they didn't have an adapter to mount it in the bay properly, they put it upside down and used the drive rails as holders. That's okay. that is a new one on me. I mean, it's do what you can with what you have, right? Let's see what else is going on inside of here. Oh, I see a Varda type battery. Doesn't look... There's a little bit of corrosion. It does not look super bad. I would not be surprised if this works. Well, that's interesting. So the RAM here, so you got 256K by 1. So this will be 512 and then 64K. So it's got 640K, but it also has larger sockets. So I will guess that this can take, what are those, 1 megabyte or 1 meg by 1, so 1 megabit. So right now it has 640K, but I bet this is configurable to have 4 megabytes on the motherboard. Ooh, that is much nicer than the other one. Hopefully this board works, because that automatically means that this is probably the one I will want to keep. Oh, and it looks like it has another surprise in there. Okay. The floppy drive, which I can see the back of without taking out, is a TIAC FD55GFR, so that is a 1.2 megabyte floppy drive. Is there any indication of a motherboard model so that this can be looked up? I don't see anything. So one thing that's nice about the RetroWeb website is you can put in the chipset and put in the configuration of slots, and it will narrow it down to, here's the set of motherboards you might be looking at, and then you can kind of filter through. So that is what I will have to do, and it looks like, all right, so there's some other stuff going on. Okay, I'm gonna do just like I did with the other one, and I'm going to pull out this card, the existing video card. Let's see what it is. It is Toshiba chipset, HEGA, and someone broke off their the screw from their cable connector. So I'm gonna guess that this is some kind of EGA card. VIP is maybe the maker. HEGA2. All right, another EGA card to look up at some point. But for now, we're going to upgrade to VGA so that I can hook it up to a monitor. I'm going to just YOLO it on this one too. I don't see, I mean, it actually looks, I mean, there's some bits of dust, but I think my fingernails are dirtier than this motherboard is. All right, it should be all hooked up now. Like, I haven't even bothered to take the battery out. I actually think it's probably going to be fine. Outstanding. I think it's going to be fine, and then it explodes. All right, well, that's an odor in the basement. Okay. I can't even tell what exploded. That is super unusual. I don't... So looking in this area, there's nothing obviously exploded. But I went back and I looked at the video footage and I stepped it frame by frame. And unfortunately, should I ever make this sort of mistake again, I'll switch it so that the tiny corner is the screen here, and the big part of the image will be the thing that might have fireworks, because it was really small. But looking at it and looking at where the explosion lined up with where this card was, all I can figure is that it was C51 here. And I'm looking at C51, the only evidence of anything that I can see is that tiny speck, which I guess does have, there is an edge there. So that must be where those fireworks came out of it. When I went back and I watched that video and I looked at how close my face was to those sparks. Kids, don't do this at home. I am still laughing at how foolish I was. And I didn't even ask anyone to hold my beer. Looking at this region of the board, there is a little bit of crustiness there from the battery and around a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clean this area in vinegar, get a little bit of vinegar on it. I'm going to remove the battery. You've got to go. Clean up this little bit of corrosion, like the corrosion on the terminals there. And there's a little bit on, you know, some of these passive components, but there's a little bit on this jumper block here. But it looks fine. I will replace this tantalum. I don't think I have any tantalum, so I may have to call around and see if I can find anyone who has tantalums. I will check the rest of them for shorts. I should have done that. Part of the reason that I was lazy and didn't do it is the usual way is to check for continuity on the power supply pins here to check to see if there's a short to ground. You can also check those same things by probing the ISO ports. I'm going to remove that. I bought a new multimeter. I'm going to dig that out. And then I will show how to do that without having to fully extract a computer from the case, how you can test for that continuity on just the ISO ports. I'm going to shame myself. The thing that's neat about this particular board is it has a 287 installed. So that's kind of interesting. So if I can get this fully revived and working, this will definitely be the board that I want to keep. Little bit of bubbling action back over here. Surprised that there wasn't more, and then it wasn't. Well, there's a little bit. Not too much though. Okay. A couple of these traces along here do look like they might be a little bit more significantly damaged. So there may be some actual soldering necessary there. Keep working this acid in and around. All right, I think I'm going to set that to the side. And this other motherboard has some corrosion in this area, but it's not obvious if that's acid leakage or if that's some other. Yeah, it is reacting a little bit. All right, so I'm going to brush this in a little bit more on this one. I can hear it sizzling. So the battery would have been connected here. So my guess is that the way that this was put in the system, the power supply was probably over top of part of the board here, and that the battery was attached here and was clipped onto the side of the power supply, or was clipped onto the side of something. And that's why it was able to drip onto this like that. All right. I'm going to let this sit for just a couple of minutes. Let the acid continue to do its job. And then I'll take both these, I'll take all three boards over to my sink and give them a rinse. I'm going to try to be careful to not ruin any of this paper that's around. Yeah. And then these will set out to dry for a while. When I first saw this computer, I mistakenly thought this said PC Turbo, but it says BC Turbo. I'm not, for sure, not a brand I'm familiar with. Disk activity light, turbo light, power light, key lock. I do not have the key. Reset switch and a turbo button that is dirty. 2 5¼ floppy drives that are different, so presumably one of these was added later. Going over to this side, nothing. Very boring. The back, this, I taped this on. This is one of the feet off the bottom. I seem to recall this probably came off in my car when I was transporting it home. Spider webs and power input, power pass-through, big chunky fan, AT keyboard port, some kind of a modem with a little switch, a little rotary switch in there for, I don't know what. It's an interesting slot. I'm not sure what's going on with this, but it's an analog modem from the 80s. Like, we're not going to care about this. It's not going to be exciting. Serial parallel I/O card with game port. These look like they're probably slot covers because they're, well, that could be a card. And that could also be a card. The video card, I have some vague recollection from when I powered this on before that this is an EGA, that I figured out that this is an EGA card, but I'm not 100% certain. So one of these is maybe composite out. I'm not sure what the story is. Maybe with these switches, this is selectable between EGA and CGA. Not sure. Once we get it open and can look at the card, we'll find out. Rolling around to the other side, have a very nice chunky red power switch that has a very satisfying feel to it. And until we look inside, that's about it for this one. It is fairly dirty, but not filthy. And I know that I turned it on before and it had signs of life. I don't remember beyond that. And I know I also have looked inside of it, and there wasn't battery damage because it had a separate, you know, one of the 4-pin on a remote connector kind of batteries. So that was good. And that was how I figured out that it was a 286. And beyond that, I do not remember. I've already removed the screws. Let's go ahead and pull this lid off. And we have a 286 motherboard, that has what looks to be a nice maker's mark on it. ELT-286B. That should make it very easy to look up on the retro web later. I see the 286 CPU, slot for the FPU. What is all this cable mess? Based on the existence of a cable like this, I'm guessing there's a hard drive in the bottom here beneath the floppy drives that is going to be an MFM. So that is probably not, I don't know if it'll work or not. It's hard to tell with these because without a battery, it's not going to remember what it was. So yeah, I'll probably have to pull this out just so that I can figure out what this hard drive is, so that when it boots up, I can tell it what the hard drive is. So I may leave this controller in here for a bit. The one thing that I am for sure going to send packing, that I'm not even going to mess about with, is this card. I'm going to straight away replace this with some kind of VGA card. So this is a Genoa. I will have to look this up because it doesn't have a marking on here that makes it immediately obvious what it is. Oh wait, Super EGA High Res. I don't know if that shows up very well on the, okay. So that says something. Oh man, and this has got a mess of jumpers up here, and then of course it's got this bank of 6 switches. Ooh, all right, well, I will have to look this up and figure this out, but that is going to be very much secondary. I'm just gonna, like, all my other displays are VGA. I do have the monitor that came with this, and I think it is buried back there, and my recollection is it is super dim. So even if I will mess around with this at some point, but that's not the important thing today. Let's pull out this weird modem card. So somebody added this and whoa, those are some chips. Holy smokes. 6511, 5311. I have no idea what those chips are. I will have to also look those up. This almost looks like a battery. That's weird. Sermatech modem? Never heard of them. And I don't see any other kind of marking to indicate what speed it might be. But that is an unusual chip package, and there's other chips hiding underneath these monsters. And then there's additional chips hiding underneath the speaker here. I may dissect that further later. And then this is the serial parallel I/O card. I will go ahead and extract it momentarily just so we can see what it is. But then I'm going to have to put it back. Wow, this is really clean. I'm surprised by this. I don't see an immediately obvious maker's mark on here. Not that I've ever ranted about that before. It could have a connector on it, presumably for an external floppy. It's got multiple ROM chips on it. That's interesting. And it's got the connector here. This presumably is the disk activity light. Okay, so now we can get a little bit better view at this motherboard. So the battery would have connected back here. And I remember it did for sure have a battery in it. And I took it out when I got it. I have opened this before. But it was, you know, right after I got it in 2018, and I took the battery out and tossed it and then closed it back up. So when I go to test that other stray motherboard, this will be the clock chip and these will be the BIOS chips. I can probably borrow these out of this board to test that other board. And if I can get that other board working, I can get another one of these clock chips and I can burn more ROMs. So that's my plan of attack for that. But that's like step 87 and we're on step 3. So we'll get there. All right. I'm going to put this back in. And this says that it is a 286 10 megahertz. So this is going to be a pretty slow 286. Okay. Now, how? So the drives look to have some kind of clips and drive rails, and there's complete hodgepodge of mismatched screws on the front here. Let me remove these and extract these drives. So they have these little clips to keep them in place. So what is this drive? Unknown due to no maker's mark. So this teardown is already being difficult. Now I am unlikely to leave 2 5¼ inch floppy drives in here. I expect that what I will do is I will probably try to figure out a way to put a 3½ inch drive, because 5¼ drives these days are a huge hassle. Okay. Oh, okay. Does this have? All right. So this has some information on it. Fujitsu M2551A26B. So that I can look up and figure out what it is. And the hard drive, which is a Seagate ST-287R that has some error maps on it. I will have to, I have not worked with MFM hard drives a lot. or RLL hard drives a lot. And I'm going to have to refer back to, what is this hidden piece of paper in here? Oh, man. There's a lot of dust flying around. Okay. So some kind of drive test information and error map. 3,600 RPM. All right. Okay. That is interesting. I don't know that I have ever found anything quite like this stuffed inside an old PC. Ooh, and it is really dusty in there. I think what I'm going to do is I'll hook this back up. Because I've already powered this on before, I'm not super worried about the power supply or any of that. I possibly should. These may be famous last words. The connectors are notched, and the cables are supposed to have a block in it, kind of like how the floppy drive cable has a little chunk in there to prevent putting it in the wrong way. This cable does not have that, and I don't remember how I extracted it. Does it say on here which pin is 1? Yes, this end is 1. Okay, so I'm going to assume red stripe means pin 1. That, just because of the way the cables are bent, I think that should be correct. I am going to grab a VGA card, look up the floppy drive that I have some information about, and I will be right back. So I've figured some things out. The Fujitsu floppy drive, was able to look up this model number. This is a 360K floppy drive, which is useful, mostly because then I can write disks that can be used on other systems. This drive, I thought it did not have any useful markings on it. Although now that I'm looking at it, I'm noticing something else, but I'll come to that. I did notice one thing. The motor on it says 300, 360 RPM. Now, 360K floppy drives spin at 300 RPM, and 1.2 meg drives spin at 360. So I'm gonna guess that this is a 1.2 meg drive. Now, at first when I looked at this, I thought that this was the model number for the motor, but I see the exact same thing is silk screened on the motherboard. So that is likely the model of the drive. I looked up this hard drive. I don't know what drive type this is going to be. My guess is that when I turn this on, the BIOS on the card is going to want to know what drive type this is. And all I know is that it's a 65 megabyte drive. I don't know what its drive type is. All right, let's turn this on and hopefully nothing explodes. Hey, look at this. So it booted up, CMOS battery, all that stuff failed, 640K RAM, which I didn't even look at. So there's 2 banks of, okay, so this actually has 1 megabyte installed because there's 2 banks of 512K each because there's 18 of the 256K by 1 RAM chips. So there's actually 1 megabyte on here, but it's just testing DOS memory or Control-Alt-Escape for setup. Let's try that. Oh, hey, look at this. Video, can I say VGA? No, I can select, okay, so EGA, and it won't let me say anything about the memory. So these have the parameters, okay, so I do need to look up the drive more specifically to see if I can find the matching set of parameters. It's kind of annoying that it doesn't tell you what size those means. All right, so we're gonna look for 820 cylinders, 6 heads, and 26 sectors. Let's 820, but 3 heads. There can't be that many drive types in here. Wait, 826 and 17? The documentation I could find says 26. All right, so I'll try to remember drive type 40. Oh, and then, well, can I? So there's all these other drive types that are 0. Well, I wonder, what if I say none if the controller figures itself out? Ooh, F2 color toggle. Oh, that's kind of horrifying. Northwest Digital Engineering. I have not ever heard of that. Anything gonna happen? Bueller? Okay. All right, so it's not... All right, let's try 40 and see if that does anything. Nothing happening. I suspect it's trying to talk to the hard drive as the wrong kind of hard drive, and that's not working. That's weird. Error encountered initializing hard drive 0. Okay. I don't understand these entries that say 0. Oh, okay, so I can enter. All right, well, what if I just set the hard drive type to 47? Let's see what it does. Okay. I decided to punt on that hard disk controller, at least for now. I wasn't getting anywhere with it, and honestly, it's just kind of a distraction. That hard disk is not gonna end up in the final computer, so it kind of doesn't matter. I'm gonna consult with some people in my area who know much more about this than I do and see if I can get some advice from them. One of the things that I do need to do that kind of is a gating factor on time is I need to wash this because it is pretty icky. That is, oh, I know that logo, because they still exist and they still use that logo. Chaintech? Chaintech. I think it's the Chaintech logo. ELT-286B, 10 megahertz on the chipset, and the CPU is also 10 megahertz. It's really hard to read, and it's one of the really weird ones. I am not gonna take that out, which means I'm gonna have to give this some extra drying time, and I will need to take pictures of how these jumpers are configured because I will have to remove those when I wash it. I'm just gonna take it over to my utility sink and give it a rinse and hit some little spots of it with a toothbrush, and then I'm gonna let it sit out in front of a fan for probably 3 days. But aside from being dirty, and the bottom side looks absolutely spotless clean, this motherboard looks fine, and it's been working. So kind of my next step, I have never actually made my own XT-IDE BIOS images before, so that will be my next adventure. I don't know how much of a tutorial this is going to end up being for that, but that is the next hard step. It has been quite some days. All of the boards have definitely had more than adequate time to dry out. I washed the inside of the bottom part of the 2 cases, and that has had enough time to dry out. At least this board, it is time to go ahead and start reassembling. I have ordered some replacement these tantalum capacitors, but they haven't arrived yet. So I'm feeling pretty confident at this point that the other 286 board that was in a case is going to have to wait until later. It'll be its own video, because that's the board that I'm going to build into a great 286 system. For this board, I am going to put this system back together, and I'm going to intend to rehome it through some means. I'm probably going to try to sell it. So the components that I have gathered for that are, I have a Trident VGA 8900. I have a generic, hopefully not too crummy, Opti chipset sound card, and I don't think this one has, so this may be not great because I don't think it has real Yamaha sound chip on it. At least I don't see one anywhere. A multi-IO card with parallel serial floppy IDE. I had some adventures with this that I will get to in a moment. And then a network card, not because I intend to network this thing, but because it can host an option ROM chip, and this option ROM chip happens to be XT-IDE. Now, what I did for that. This is where some of the off-camera adventure began. I just downloaded one of the pre-built XT-IDE images, the one for AT, because this is going to be in an AT system. So first kind of annoying thing is they basically provide those ROM images under the assumption that you're going to use them with an XT-IDE card and use their software to go ahead and write that image to a flash chip instead of an actual EEPROM. Okay, fine. It's what a lot of people will do. If you're not a lot of people, you have a different road ahead of you. So the ROM image that is provided is, the one that I picked is around 6K. So I had to do a bit of research and find a Linux command that I could use to pad this image out to 8K. And then, because these Etherlink cards are really picky about the ROM images that they will enable, I had to use another piece of software. There was a DOS program called ROMCKSUM. I used that to write the correct checksum byte. And the programmer that I have is a really nice programmer, but it only works on Windows. And I did not have a single working Windows machine around. So I had to take quite a detour, and I just set up a Windows XP machine and set up the software on it, and was able to run the checksum program in the DOS shell on Windows XP, and then was able to write the image. It was quite an adventure. I tested these cards together on a different known working system, on a 386 SX that I have. So I know these work together, and I picked just an old piece of spinning rust that I have around. Now the adventure that I had was, so this card is one of the later versions of one of these ISA cards. And all of these jumpers over here were in these, it's kind of a column of 3-pin jumper blocks. So you can either be on the left 2 or the right 2. They were all on the left 2, which seemed like a plausible default configuration. And on the back, they're super nice, and they have very politely silkscreened on all of the settings. And so you think like, all right, well, this is, okay, so this is 1, 2, like, all right, we'll set up everything for 1, 2. And if you don't have memorized what the proper floppy drive IO port address is, and what the IDE the primary IDE controller base I/O address is, you might not notice that what it's telling you is there's a tiny little line underlining the default one. So basically you want it to be the left 2, the right 2, the left 2, the right 2, the left 2. I didn't notice that. And so I had this configured where it was going to generate interrupts for the primary IDE controller, but it was going to be at the secondary IDE controller's I/O address. And being very helpful, the XT-IDE BIOS said, oh yeah, this thing's fine. It figured out how to make it work. It took a really long time every boot up, and I was like, God, this is weird. Why is it showing on the initialization screen? Why does it see what is? And I couldn't get the floppy to work because the floppy was set for IO port 370 when, as you can see here, the correct, as you can maybe see here, like that, it was set for IO port 370, but the actual IO port should be 3F0. I was like, why wouldn't I have any floppies? Oh, because it's configured wrong, silly. That took a shocking amount of time to figure out. Bonus points for putting the configuration information on here, but take some points away for making it hard to tell what the correct way is to have it set up. Because until I noticed those tiny little underlines on those numbers, I had no idea why things were just not working correctly. And so I swapped this with another IO controller, the one that's usually in that 386SX, and it worked fine. Like, well, okay, what? It took a really long time to sort out. All right, so I'm going to put all these cards in here. I set the power supply for this system off to the side somewhere. I'll have to find that out. I'm gonna give it a trial run on the bench, and now my success criteria, usually for a 486 or a Pentium, my success criteria would be, can I get Doom running on it? A 286 will not run Doom. It does not support the correct kind of protected mode. There is a protected mode on 286s. It's different. That is a topic for a whole episode of its own. So I think what I'm going to do is my success criteria will be if I can get Wolfenstein 3D running on this, then running with sound, then I'm gonna call it good. Connected everything up. I've hooked up the 1.2 megabyte drive that was originally in the system, and then I found a 1.4 megabyte drive to hook up to it. I'm going to install DOS onto this. I already powered it up once and forgot to plug in the drive to power. And so it detects the hard drive fast as can be. Okay, good. All right, so this is working as anticipated. I'm going to install MS-DOS 5.0 on this, partially because it's what I had handy sitting on the desk from when I was doing the recent Tandy 1000 video. I mean, recent, like months ago. Over the summer, the discs were still setting out, and I think that that's a decent version of DOS for a 286. So this seems to be booting up and working. I'm going to install it, and I'm not going to force you to fast forward through me going through the very, very boring process of installing MS-DOS. This board is stupid. On a 286 with a megabyte of RAM, it should be totally trivial to get Wolf 3D running. However, I kept going through the process of trying to get it running, and it would start, and then, oh, you don't have enough conventional memory. And I'm like, well, what the heck? There shouldn't be anything using conventional memory. Like, my config.sys has nothing. Like, the stuff that was there was commented out. My auto exec bat has nothing. Like, I set the prompt and the path, and that's it. And the Unisound driver doesn't, it pokes at the sound card and then it terminates. It has nothing left. And I'm like, how is there not enough conventional memory? And I looked at the mem output, I don't know, 1,000 times, and I'm like, how is there no memory? I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. And then I stopped and I looked at it and I said, okay, there's this much free memory. There's 12K, 1K, 2K. So, you know, rounding up, there's like 16K missing. Well, wait. 16K plus 494K. That's not 640K. What? Why do I not have 640K? So let me reboot, and I'll show you why this motherboard is stupid. Right here. If there's 1 megabyte installed, you get 512K of conventional memory, and you get 512K of extended memory. Who wants that configuration? Like that? I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say that configuration of memory on a 286 is wrong. It is just wrong. That is not valid. Like, just hard no. There was 2 options. One option was, okay, well, I can pull out one of these banks of RAM chips and replace the 256K memory chips with 64K memory chips. That felt like a lot of work. I did not. There are a few things more tedious and irritating than pulling out a bazillion chips and putting in a bazillion more. Option 2, which is what I actually did and will set up again, is I have a couple of these. These are reasonably common AST 6-pack plus memory cards. They're made for XT kind of machines, to machines that can't have 640K on the motherboard. Original IBM PC could only have 128K or something, so there were a lot of these memory cards that can have up to 384K on them. Actually, it must have been 256K, because that doesn't add up otherwise. I don't know. I've never actually had one of those machines, and I haven't played around with them very much, so forgive me. This for sure has 384K on it to fill out the rest of your conventional memory. So what I did is I dug this card out, I configured it to disable the game port on it, configure the parallel port to be LPT2 because there was no way to disable it, configure the COM port to be COM3 because there was no way to disable it, and disable the clock chip because this already has a clock chip on it. And then change the switch configuration to only expose 128K of memory. So with this in, I can have the full 640K of conventional memory. There is an annoyance with that. So with this card installed, no matter what I do on boot up, it complains memory size error, run setup, and when you run setup, it doesn't, like, you come down and says, okay, base memory 512K, let me edit that to tell you how much. Nope. Like, this BIOS is terrible. And I feel like I've seen a couple other YouTube videos recently of people working on boards with these old chips and technologies, and they have some crappy chips and technology specific BIOS that came with it, and they're awful. Just awful. I believe that this is the most recent version of the BIOS specific to this motherboard. At least it's on the retro web. But at least with that board in place, I can run Wolf 3D. And it actually works. What should I do? Should I leave this board installed in it? I actually have another one of these that doesn't have any RAM installed in it yet, and I'll just, if I'm going to leave one of these boards in it, I would use that one and just populate it out with 128K. Should I leave it like this? I mean, that extra 128K of conventional memory is going to be real slow. Like, best case scenario is it's half speed because this is an 8-bit card and it's a 16-bit processor. Should I do that? Or should I pull a bank of this memory and replace it with 64K RAM chips? I don't know which is better. They both seem terrible, frankly. I kind of know what my gut tells me to do, and it's not the thing I want to do, but I'm very interested to hear your feedback. So let me know what you think. In the meantime, I'm going to call this maybe not great success, moderate success. But I'm going to tear this all down and I'm going to put it back in its case, and I'm going to move on to the next thing. After getting the computer fully put together in its case and everything all hooked up and being all happy about it and like, yeah, project done, I turned it on before putting the lid on and all that. Like, you can't be too confident. It's the nature of this hobby. And it started screaming at me about no extended memory, can't load, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, come on, for reals. So I rebooted it because I hadn't watched the BIOS screen. And I noticed something different here. And I'm gonna have to eat my words, and I'm gonna have to take back a whole bunch of nasty, nasty stuff that I said about this motherboard. Notice this. And at first when I booted up, I thought, oh yeah, that's fine. And I looked at, mem/c and looked at how much conventional memory was there, and I thought, yeah, that's fine. It's because of that memory board, except the memory board's over here. Memory board's not in the computer. And I thought, what? And come again? Here's what happened. When I took the computer all the way apart and took it over to wash the motherboard, I took all the jumpers off of the board so they wouldn't accidentally get washed off and go down the drain. And I took pictures of everything so that I would know where all the connectors went and all that. And so when I put it back together and put it back in the case, I put it back the way it was originally. These two little blue jumpers, which you can just barely see here, it turns out are super important. This jumper, J23, they're both 3-pin connectors, so you can have them connected 1, 2, or 2, 3. When it's in what I'm going to arbitrarily call the 1, 2 position, when it's in the 2 towards the front of the case, that selects 256 K-bit memory. When it's in the other position, it selects 64 K-bit memory. This other jumper, if it's in the 1, 2 position, or if it's disconnected altogether and setting on the table somewhere, for instance, it selects to 512K base mem, 512K extended memory. If you have it in the, what I'm arbitrarily calling the 2-3 position, where it currently is, that selects put all the megabyte of memory in the first megabyte. So you end up with 64K of conventional memory, you end up with some UMBs, and then some memory areas where there's option ROMs and stuff like that you can't use. So now when it boots up with the jumpers back arguably where they should be and where they were before I started mucking about with it, there is ample conventional memory. And as far as I can tell from the memory that's used by DOS, I think that there are UMBs. I did configure DOS to load in the UMB area. I'm not a DOS memory management expert, but based on the output of mem/c, I think it's doing what I have instructed it. So I think this is the 1 megabyte configuration that a person would actually want on a 286, and it was there the whole time. Now I've looked up this motherboard on the retro web, and there is a really janky picture of it. There are several different versions of this board on the retro web. There is one that has matching patterns of jumper configurations that has a super janky picture. So I'm going to pull this board back out, my favorite. I'm going to take some detailed pictures of it, and I'm going to try to add the information that I have figured out about these jumpers, because there is zero documentation for it. There is some documentation for some other flavors of the ELT-286B, but they're for different boards that have different silkscreen jumper numbers and stuff, and they don't match this. So I'm gonna try to help the next poor fool that encounters one of these boards and takes all the jumpers off to go wash the board and then is sad. Past me would have appreciated what future me is going to do. If that makes any sense at all. I'm going to do with this board what I should have done with the, the fireworks display board, and I'm going to test it for dead shorts. And the easy way that I have seen other people do this is go through, pick one of the ground lines on the power supply plug and check. Okay, so that's one of the other ground lines. There's 2 grounds on each half of the connector here, and just check to see if, oh, so there is, oh, there's some shorts on this. Okay, this board may not get, wow, it's, okay. So I'm not sure why so many of those scream, but that means that there is definitely a short on here. So I'm going to assume that one of these tantalums is, at least one of these tantalums is bad. And I don't want to stink up my basement again by finding out the hard way which one of them it is. After conferring with some people in my local area through our Discord server, what I have learned is that go through and check the resistance on the various capacitors, and the one with the lowest resistance is the problem. So I'm gonna go through these. I'm gonna check all of them. The other thing that I was told was that sometimes as you get closer to the one that is bad, the resistance will gradually drop. Now, something that I've noticed on this, I'm just going to pick one at random, and it's actually, I can just do it off the connector here, is what? Why is it not? Okay. Okay, here we go. So it's only showing 2 digits, 18.4 something. I don't know if that's enough precision for this check, but I'm going to go through and hopefully I'll figure something out. Well, now that's odd. I wonder if this one is the problem. It starts off at 18.4 something, but then drops to approximately 0. Well, I'm going to take a chance that it's this one, and I'm going to remove this. I have a bunch of these capacitors. They should arrive tomorrow. I think I ordered 20 total capacitors, or maybe it was only 10. Anyway, plenty in case that I get one wrong. Okay. All right, let's see what this capacitor says on its own out of the circuit. It says, you are not the father. And so that likely means that this is going to still say that there's a short. Yes. Well, foo. So I checked every single capacitor, every single tantalum capacitor, and all of them either said completely open, presumably because they're on different voltage, on a different voltage line, or said 18.404142 ohms. So I'm thinking it's not a tantalum, you know, but maybe it is. So I was going to have this tilted up so that we could see the postcard. It won't do anything because there's no ROMs, but at least some of these lights may come up, and I may get some information. I don't know what else to do to diagnose this other than give it power, which I have some anxiety about. So I'm gonna lean way back. I already had this kind of excitement once in this video. I don't really need it twice. No explosions. So assuming that that is an indication of a short, I would anticipate some chip on here getting very warm very soon. And I don't feel anything. All right, I'm gonna let this set for a few seconds and see if anyone gets screaming hot on here. I'm really not sure how to interpret the very, very low resistance between ground and 5 volt. And the CPU is getting warm. It's a 12 megahertz 286. I would expect it to get warm. I mean, it's not, didn't leave a scorch mark on my finger. And everything else feels room temperature. Okay. I am going to grab the ROMs out of this board, because after my research on the RetroWeb, I suspect it's at least possible that they're compatible. So I'm gonna try these, and we'll see what happens. Okay, ROMs inserted. I haven't added the clock chip. No other cards. I can risk some ROMs. These images are available, and I can get more of these EPROMs if this wrecks them. I'm still gonna lean back because I'm still nervous about explosions. There is just nothing on the post analyzer, and the wow, well, that's interesting. Oh. Oh. My current advice to my past self is get 2 of these and put mounting brackets on them. This is not the rear. I had this stupid card in backwards. That would be why it showed up weird. Okay. This time for sure. Okay. As I've removed the ROMs, this is the behavior I expect. ROMs are replaced. Let's try again. Oh, getting some postcodes. Okay. All right. Hooked up a VGA card, connected it to the monitor, still have the postcard analyzer in it. I did really quickly check it with the ROMs in the other order, and it doesn't post at all. So this is the correct order of low ROM, high ROM. Okay. And it looks like I see a postcode of 2. No beeps. No beeps, no image, no explosion. All of the correct lights are on the postcard. Let me try turning off. Let me watch the reset light. Yeah, reset was on momentarily and then off. Either these ROMs are just not compatible with this motherboard, which is definitely possible, or this board has bigger problems. Now, in addition to ordering tantalum capacitors, I have also ordered some of the correct kind of EPROMs. Those aren't scheduled to arrive for over a week, so this this part of the project is also delayed. Okay, well, I'm just going to go back to the 286 that is currently golden, and I'm going to put it together into a full system, put everything in the case, get it all cleaned up and looking good, and we'll wrap up with that. I'm going to consider this an unqualified success. I got this 286 all cleaned up and refurbished and ready to go for retro use in the modern era. I don't know what to call it. It's not fully like vintage configured. It's pretty much all vintage parts, but it's much more usable in modern times for retro things. I don't know. We try to justify our hobby, all right? So this is going to end part 1. What's next? Well, I think the first thing is, as soon as the replacement capacitors come in, I want to get this one working. I have chips available for this to upgrade it to 4 megabytes, and since this is the board that I'm intending to keep, that's the plan. I'm going to upgrade this to 4 megabytes, maybe even beyond. So that's the first thing that's up next. Next will be to try to get this board working, and I don't know if fixing this is within the realm of my skills. I have ROM chips on the way, and I'm going to try burning to those images, BIOS images for this specific board from the RetroWeb and see if that allows it to get any farther. I checked out the postcode that was on it, and the postcode just said 8042 keyboard controller test. So it's somewhere very, very early on in the boot process. No idea. It is entirely possible that the keyboard controller is bad. That will be another thing to try. So there's a handful of things to try. I don't know. We'll see what we see about this particular board. That will be part 2. If it turns out to be particularly interesting and I do something super exciting with it, it may get stretched all the way out to a part 3. We'll see. If you have any advice for me still about configuring this computer, I think I'm going to leave this one as it is with the 640K and the UMB. I would really like to hear what you have to say about that. I did not use 286s back in the day, so I have no experience with good or bad things to do with them. The only 286 that I've messed around with is the Tandy 1000, and I've basically used that as a glorified XT. If you've enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you clicked the like button. If you are interested in seeing the future work on those other boards, I highly recommend that you click the subscribe button. And until next time, try to remember the good stuff.